Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me in my studies today. 24 weeks ago, I began to externalize my studies of a book a week by sharing the passages that are most prominent to me, as well as oftentimes my thoughts about the focus topics covered in the books. Today, I'm reading Alan Watts' The Spirit of Zen. What images come to mind when we think of heaven, the ultimate truth, God? A sage who understands these things to his or her bones. The images that we conjure up are magical, yes, but also characteristically beyond our reach, outside of ourself. Not mundane, not something that we've seen today or yesterday, certainly not something in our close proximity. The Zen approach suggests that this very activity of conjuring imagery, of conceptualizing, of creating thought form, may be what distances us from heaven, from the ultimate truth, from the experience of the sage. If and when we dabble in refraining from distancing ourselves from the fabric of the sacred all, from the kingdom of heaven, from the Tao, whatever we want to call it, I believe that fear and taboo emerge in our systems. One of three fears emerge, the first being the most terrifying. If I believe myself to be part of the ultimate truth in some way, am I insane? Is that lunacy? It has been called that in our history. Another is a sincere interest in humility. If I believe myself to be part of a greater fabric that is, in its essence, pure, what does that mean about how I esteem myself in relation to others? And third, if I surrender to the sacred all, will I just be lazy, unproductive? Will I lose all motivation? A thorough exploration of the Zen approach calms all of these fears. Firstly, the opposite of lunacy is exhibited in the Enlightened One. What we see is a calm, steady, peaceful equanimity that is contagious, and in being shared only adds to its energy source. Secondly, the Enlightened One, the Buddha, esteems all equally, recognizes the divinity in each and every individual human form, no matter their unique patterning of adventure through the manifestations of good and evil. And thirdly, the opposite of laziness is exhibited in an individual who has come to surrender to the sacred all. What we see is a natural flow in and with activity, a lively engagement in the human experience. Without further ado, I'll move toward today's readings. Enjoy. Page 42. Zen synthesized the idealism, the immovable serenity, and the austerity of Buddhism with the poetry and fluidity of Taoism, with its reverence for the incomplete, the imperfect, and the changing, as showing the presence of life, of the unending flow of Tao. These two elements pervade the whole spirit of Zen, together with its own unique dynamic quality, which gives life and strength to the other two. Page 46. The truth is that Zen is so hard to understand just because it is so obvious. And we miss it time and time again because we are looking for something obscure. With our eyes on the horizon, we do not see what lies at our feet. Page 47. Man's apparent humility in thinking that wisdom is something too sublime to reveal itself in the ordinary affairs of his life is a subtle form of pride. Inwardly, he feels that he must be so great as to be removed from the things of the world before he can receive the truth. And such is his pride that he will only deign to receive it from the lips of sages and from the pages of sacred scriptures. Careful self-preparation for finding the truth at some future time or from some external source is putting off the issue of seeing the facts just as they are at the moment, be they good or evil. Page 48. All things, however vile on the surface and however insignificant, are aspects of the Buddha nature. And this implies that every being and thing must be accepted. Nothing can be excluded from the lotus land of purity as being worldly or trivial or base. Page 49. Zen interprets striving after Buddhahood as implying a distinction between oneself and the Buddha nature. That is the foundation of egoism, for it means that the self has been separated from the rest of life, that it has become isolated from other beings. And this is a lesser form of lunacy, for the lunatic is the most isolated person in the world. Page 51. It has been said that to define is to kill. And if the wind were to stop for 1 second for us to catch hold of it, it would cease to be wind. The same is true of life. Perpetually, things and events are moving and changing. We cannot take hold of the present moment, make it stay with us. We cannot call back past time or keep forever a passing sensation. Once we try to do this, all we have is a dead memory. The reality is not there, and no satisfaction can be found in it. Page 53. If attack represents the external world or life, and defense one's response to life, this must be taken to mean that the distinction between self and life is destroyed. Egoism disappears when the contact between the two is so immediate that they move together, keeping in the same rhythm. Page 57. Because life is this elusive and perpetually changing process, every time we think we have really taken possession of something, the truth is that we have completely lost it. All that we possess is our own idea about the thing desired, an idea which tends to remain fixed, which does not grow as the thing grows. Thus, one of the most noticeable facts about those obsessed with greed for possessions, whether material goods or cherished ideas, is their desire that things shall remain as they are, not only that their possessions shall remain in their own hands, but also that the possessions themselves shall not change. I've moved down a bit lower on the same page here. Once we imagine that we have grasped the truth of life, the truth has vanished, for truth cannot become anyone's property, the reason being that truth is life. And for one person to think that he possesses all life is a manifest absurdity. The part cannot possess the whole. Page 58. If, therefore, life can never be grasped, how can it ever be understood? How can truth be known if it can never be defined? Zen would answer, by not trying to grasp or define it. And this is the fundamental Buddhist ideal of non-attachment, or the Taoist ideal of wu-wei. Essentially, Satori is a sudden experience, and it is often described as a turning over of the mind, just as a pair of scales will suddenly turn over when a sufficient amount of material has been poured into one pan to overbalance the weight in the other. Page 69. This is in reference to the Zen Koan. It is a problem which admits of no intellectual solution. The answer has no logical connection with the question, and the question is of such a kind as to baffle the intellect altogether. Here on page 70 will be the last quote that I'll read from this book today. Koans involve one in some kind of dilemma. There's generally a choice between two alternatives, both of which are equally impossible. Thus, each koan reflects the giant koan of life. For to Zen, the problem of life is to pass beyond the two alternatives of assertion and denial, both of which obscure the truth.